Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? Hi, I'm Nathan Mercero, CEO of Planning Alternatives. We're a disruptive brand in the financial planning space with a point of view that true wealth has nothing to do with money. Growing up in a small town in Canada, I experienced examples of families with money and without. It started me on this journey of understanding wealth and the idea that spending a day in a canoe with someone could be one of the best investments you could make. Join me as I sit down with leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, rule breakers, and friends to discover their perspective of true wealth. And maybe you'll start to shift yours. I'm excited today to be joined by Jennifer Griffith. Jennifer wrote her debut memoir, which is Both Sides of Then, Finding Love After Abandonment. And I've had a chance, Jennifer, to meet you and share some experiences at the Jackson Writers Conference. Thanks for working on the board there. Would love for you to share with listeners, how did you become an author? Because that wasn't your original background, I believe.
That wasn't. Well, Nathan, it's wonderful to be on your podcast, by the way. You're awesome. I love all the things you do in the community. How did I become an author? Well, it is something I always had the ache. I always wanted to write, and I was an English major. And when I left college, I was going to pursue publishing, and then I received a master's in technical writing and editing, and that led me to tech sales. So it was, if you can imagine, here I am in my early 20s, and I get an offer in publishing, which is one a target earning, and then I get a tech sales offer, and I think, oh, that sounds a little bit better for me. So I landed in tech sales, and I was in technology for almost 20 years, and I loved it. I loved everything about my career. I loved the people, the pace, and I think actually technology sales and writing are more intrinsically linked than you would think. They're deeply rooted in storytelling. And if you're a good storyteller, you can be a good sales executive because you're getting to the story of the company and aligning that to what you're selling. So little caveat there. But what actually happened is when my father was passing away 9 years ago, I had a few key pivotal moments with him. He told me a secret to my childhood days before he died that allowed me to put the missing piece to my youth together. And that was very important for my memoir. But most of all, he chose death with dignity. So he knew when he was going to pass. And we had these just really beautiful couple of months with him as he was, as he said, getting out of one taxi and going to another. And my sisters and I were with him, and he was normally a very stoic man and a little bit reserved, but he became soft and squishy is what I call it. And there were I love yous, and he was holding our hand, and he was just really revealing himself in a way he never did to me and when growing up with him. And he said something. And since we're in the canoe, I'll tell you what he said. And I was sitting at his feet, and it was a couple of days before he passed. He had given me this secret that he wanted to tell me about my childhood, and it's in the book. And then he said, it went so fast. And I said, what did, Dad? And he said, life. It went so fast. And Nathan, that was like, I get chills every time I say it. It was visceral. And I realized that I had an opportunity to pursue a dream that I had always put in on the back burner, and that listening to him at the end of his life, I realized this is the moment for me to write a book. I thought it was a novel. I didn't think it was going to be a memoir. And that was just really the key moment that allowed me to cut my career in half. Technology sales, now author. And that's how I got here.
I didn't realize until you shared that, and thank you for sharing that story about your dad, that we actually have that in common. My father had an accident at life stage, which for 13 weeks he really fought valiantly and then passed. But it was in that window of time that I learned so much about him and just the insights and the appreciation for his character. And it sounds like you had this similar experience with your father. Looking back, outside of just that moment of time when you're sharing his last days with him, what are some things that he influenced you around that you still cherish to this day?
Oh, yes. Well, he was a hard worker, and he was very honest. He said, In his obituary, I wrote, he said a lot by saying very little. He was a man of action and he was gritty. And those are the things I really took from him. And I'm glad you shared that experience because I think oftentimes there are these invisible boundaries that parents have with their children that they maintain throughout their life of not sharing their secrets or their dreams and hopes and desires and wins and losses. And I'm trying to break that mold. I don't think you should do it when they're a teenager. There's always an appropriate time for you to reveal yourself as a person, not just the parent that you were to your children. But isn't it valuable? I mean, didn't you get so much from that time with your father when he opened up his heart and his soul and just said, "This is the man I am, separate from me being your father. This is the man I am." And that's like a lot of what I do with my book since I wrote my mother's story and I delved into her story and linked it to my own. I often ask people, raise your hand if you were born from a mother. Everybody's hands go up. And then I say, raise your hand if you know the woman she was before she became your parent. And I think those exercises as we get older and we have these conversations with the people that raised us really hold the key to our own identity and really help us put the pieces together on who we are. So I learned a lot from him, but I also learned a lot from honoring his story as not just my dad, but as a man that was gritty and very straightforward.
You mentioned that you learned a lot in sales that parallels the storytelling of book writing.
Yeah.
What type of sales were you in? I know you mentioned tech, and we have a lot of listeners who are in sales. What were some insights that you learned in that stage of your career that you would pass on to someone that is looking to continue to advance their career?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's so many things I learned. I worked at Salesforce for almost 10 years. I was in the ecosystem for 10, the Salesforce ecosystem, and incredible training. One is storytelling. As I said earlier, the other thing is you have to be an incredible listener and you have to be curious. And you can't. So I was selling CRM, but then it became a lot more than that and working for Salesforce. So you have to be inherently deeply, deeply curious about your customers. And that's how you get to the top line, what their business initiative is. The other thing that I think is third thing that I think is equally important, that isn't important for creative people as well, is that you have to have a business plan. You have to have a business plan for your territory as a salesperson. You have to have a business plan for your book. And I think a lot of people shy away from that. They think, oh, I'm an author and I'm creative. I don't need those things. Business acumen doesn't transfer over, but it really does. And that is one thing that's helped me since selling books is very difficult, Nathan, it's not easy. And I just had that in me where the no's, the getting a no is a path to yes, but then also having a business plan for my book and my podcast has really, really helped me. I would say are the big things.
And when did you know in your career that it was time to change lanes and focus on this author opportunity?
That is such a good question. I just had an article republished that I wrote 10 years ago, and I wrote it as I left my career. And the sign that there was I had second child infertility and I was going through IVF. I had a huge job. I had a 40-person team and a $40 million number. And here I was, trying to have a baby at the same time, and that was not working. And it was through 3 years of IVF and 2 miscarriages where I said, "What am I doing? I I've done it. I've proven myself. My priorities completely shifted." I had a 4-year-old at home, and I just thought to myself, "It's time for me to do something different."
And was that just waking up and it was clear, or did it take time?
It took time. I think really, and we're in the canoe, so I'm telling you, but it was really that second miscarriage, which was a late stage pregnancy, that I just thought to myself, why am I doing this? Why am I racing away from my beautiful child that's home and running into the city and thinking that I can have it all? Actually, I think oftentimes, especially women are told to pursue everything. You can have it all, do it all. And I think there's actually beauty in choosing. And so that moment when I lost the second child, several months in, I decided that was it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this change. And it was the best decision I ever made. It was terrifying, but it was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the circumstances. That's a
Thank
very
you.
it's time. Um, so tell me about the book. What shaped the purpose of the book, and how did the puzzle pieces of putting it together come together?
It was an interesting process. I basically wrote 2 books and put them together. So I originally, was on a mission to write my mother's story, to honor my mother's story of being raised in an orphanage in Philadelphia after her parents died tragically 2 years apart, and then being forced to relinquish her firstborn, my brother, for adoption in the decades before Roe, known as The Secret History of Adoption. And so for me, I wanted to give voice to the stories that she shared with me that I knew she could never write. And then I wrote that and I worked with an editor and she said, it's lovely, but I actually wanted more of your story as well. And so that's how I ended up writing a second book, which is my story weaved together with my mother's. And that's when I opened up this, I call it the code of how deeply we are connected to our mother's stories and their childhood more than we think. And for me, I thought, how could my life be similar to my mom? She was raised in an orphanage. I had a home with a dog and a cat and a dad that came home every day, a mom that left vacuum lines in the carpet. and but when I wrote our 2 stories, I realized that there were more parallels to our narratives than I could have ever imagined. And I've learned in talking to people about my book and on my podcast that that's true for all of us if we do that work, which is important work.
You raised a fascinating question about who knows your mother before she had you, and why do you think there's such a bifurcation, kind of like a before and after awareness of our parents?
I think there's many reasons. One is that generational shift. We had those parents where they didn't talk about feelings. They weren't asked about feelings. I think that's the obvious one. And I think there are these, I call them the invisible boundaries that we put up and that our mothers and our fathers don't want to offer their vulnerability at times because they keep it from you when you're being raised as a way of protecting you and making you feel safe as a child and a teenager. And I just don't think we've learned the art of letting that go over time. My mom was forced to tell me her story because she had found my brother and she had to tell me she had had this child before me. And so she was forced to do that. She was forced to reveal the woman she was before she became my mom. But I don't think it's just something that we've done in society, and that's something that I want to change. I think we have to have curiosity about the people they were because, like I said earlier, it holds clues to your own identity in ways that you could not imagine. And the only reason I can say this is because I did that, right? I wrote my mom's story and then I wrote mine and then this it was, it was almost like biblical in a way where I started to put these stories together and realize, wait a minute, I'm so much more closer to her narrative than I ever thought. And that's why she did the things that she did. And that's why she behaved the way that she behaved. And there's something very freeing in doing that work, very freeing. And it leads you to an acceptance of your parents that I don't think we always have. And for me, it was it led me to a lot of forgiveness that I needed to forgive for. Mhm.
That's powerful. I think there's many times where there's friction points in relationships. It could be any relationship, but certainly within a family, the past can solidify to become a wall, and it really prevents people from experiencing true connection. And I think that it's you mentioned vulnerability, and granted, earlier generations just didn't value that or seek that out. How are you trying to incorporate these characteristics with your family now? Because we have almost a new chapter in life that we're writing as parents, or whoever's involved in the family unit that we can now influence. What's your point of view
On
about the
that
future and those relationships?
yes, I think it's so important. One of the reasons I wrote my book was so that my son in later life could read it and reflect on me and realize I was the way that I was. As parents, don't we have a lot to apologize for eventually? We're trying to get it right. We know we're not going to get it right all the time. And I think making that connection for our children, for instance, I get really hyper focused on my son's grades. As a sign of, is he doing well? Is he thriving? And that type of thing. That comes right from my story. That comes from my time in high school where I was not doing well emotionally and wasn't, in the right group of friends or whatnot. And those grades were the indicator of something happening. And so for me, here I am projecting my own experience on my son Drake. But I think my purpose for this and what I want people to do is, as you evolve and grow into your life, to not just look forward, to look back, because it is the reflecting on where you came from, where your parents came from, that actually propels you forward. And that's the thing I think we miss a lot. We don't want to go back there. I don't want to revisit that. I don't want to ask those questions of my parents. But actually, when you do, it opens doors to your future. And that's the part that I think we miss.
One of the things that I remember vividly about my parents, it actually happened after I left home and headed out to college and then got a job and started paying for bills myself. Their IQ just skyrocketed. It was amazing. It's like
Didn't
day
it?
by day, I would have these realizations. Wow, my parents actually had some good points and some good advice.
They're not as
It
dumb as
was
I thought they were.
exactly. I mean, they were geniuses about 5 years after I left the house. And
Isn't
I
that
think it's
funny?
important to see where we're at in life, because many times the moment of either conflict or the situation where, hey, I'm with this person and I want, as a parent, and you want to move on from them, I think those are precious times and available for all of us to enjoy. Tell me a little bit about your podcast and what are the conversations that you're having with people now?
Oh, I love my podcast. I wish I could do it every day, don't you? Isn't it fun? It's
It
one of
is fun.
favorite my favorite mediums. My podcast is about your mother, where your story begins. And it was born during the pandemic because I had this manuscript ready and then the whole world turned inside out. And I was sitting next to a 10-year-old who had a really hard time doing Zoom school. And I thought to myself, I don't want to write more as a means of getting my book out into the world. I want to build a platform and I just want to talk to people about the things I asked myself when I was writing my book. And so I interview people of all different backgrounds. I just interviewed a gold medalist Olympian yesterday about the influence his parents had on his career. I interview authors, and every one of those conversations is like a snowflake. I know that's cliche, but they're all different because all of our relationships with our mothers and parents are different. And that's the thing that I think is most beautiful about the podcast and why I enjoy it so much.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time to spend it in the metaphorical canoe. I'm inspired by your bravery and willingness to be transparent and share your story. And what that does is become a catalyst for others to take the step as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm inspired by you too and all the cool things that you do.
All right. We'll stay in touch then. Thanks for your
Awesome.
time.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. To discover what wealth means to you, please take our assessment at planningalt.com.